Good evening, everyone. Let me call to order this meeting of the West Palm Beach City Commission. Today is Monday, August 3rd, 2026, and the time is 5:00 p.m. We will start this meeting off, as we do all of our meetings, with a moment of silence, please. Mr. President, can you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Let me remind everyone in the audience of the rules of civility and decorum which govern this meeting. Officials shall be recognized by the chair and shall not interrupt a speaker. Public comment shall be addressed to the City Commission as a whole and not to any individual on the dais or in the audience. Displays of anger, rudeness, ridicule, impatience, lack of respect, and personal attacks are strictly prohibited. Unauthorized remarks from the audience, stamping of feet, whistles, yells, and similar demonstrations should not be permitted. Please govern yourself accordingly, as offenders may be removed from the meeting. Also, any person wishing to address the commission shall file a written request with the city clerk. They should complete a comment card which contains the agenda item the person wishes to address, as well as the person's full name, address, and again, the number of the agenda item. Please govern yourself accordingly, as if the person will not be recognized if the comment card is not completed. Madam City Administrator, are there any additions, deletions, reorganization of the agenda?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Very good, thank you. We'll now go into item 6.1, which is Florida Constitution Proposed Amendments presentation by State Representative Emily Gregory. Representative, thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor and Commission. I am State Representative Emily Gregory. Let me put it in slideshow. And I'm here to talk about the proposed amendment that will be on the ballot in November. Today we'll talk about how our property tax system works, what the proposed amendment could change, and what potential implications for homeowners, renters, local government, and essential core services. So when you think about Florida state funding, we have three main sources of revenue. We have sales tax, sales and rental. We have some miscellaneous, including corporate income, tourism bed tax, and third, our largest source of revenue as a state is property taxes. So for most states, state revenue is a three-pronged stool that is sales tax, property tax, and income tax. We, of course, as a state don't have income tax, so we already are at a two-prong stool, and we enjoy relatively low sales tax. So we really do rely heavily on property taxes to fund many of our core services. So what are property taxes? They are based on the assessed value of your home, known as ad valorem. The state government in Tallahassee does not collect these taxes. They are collected by the local government and stay in the community. And what do they fund? This very long list. So police, fire, ambulance and rescue, public schools, emergency and disaster relief, very important right now as we are in hurricane season. Infrastructure and maintenance, so if you have a pothole on your street, property taxes funds the repair. Community services, public health and social services, to include our safety net hospitals, parks and rec, South Florida water management, our water management, environmental and utility services, trash collection, water, sewer systems, stormwater drainage, and local environmental programs. I'll make a note that depending upon the municipality, some of these are funded through non-ad valorem. Each municipality is different, but this is an example of things that many municipalities do use property tax revenue to fund. Additionally, we have the unique healthcare district, which is incredible in Palm Beach County. It serves safety net hospitals as well as community mental health services, our trauma hawk. So this is all dependent upon property tax revenue, as well as the Children's Services Council, which provides essential care for our 0 to 5 population in Palm Beach County, as well as libraries, parks, and some court-related expenditures. So you can see the vast number of core services that property taxes pays for. So for each one of these, we've picked a council member at random. So this is, I don't know whose it is, either the mayor or one of the council members. So you can go on the property tax website and see your itemized property tax bill. So each line item of what you're paying for. So you can see that the healthcare district, for example, is $187. The South Florida water management is a $29 and $27 breakdown. So you can see this total tax bill is $6,000 and what this breakdown and what it's paying for. It's all very transparent. So we'll talk about the current homestead exemption and then what is being proposed and will be on the ballot in November. So for over 30 years, we've had the homestead exemption of $50,000. There are additional carve-outs for surviving spouses of a first responder, veterans. So there are additional carve-outs, but most individuals that live full-time in Florida, their primary residence, has a tax exemption of $50,000. Equally as important, the assessed value of the home cannot go up by more than 3% annually, or the change in CPI, whatever is more favorable to the homeowner. So this has been a very stable property tax system for those that have owned their home for a long time. Save Our Homes has been very popular. It was approved by the voters in 1992. For some history on property taxes, in order to change the property taxes, you do have to amend the Florida Constitution. It is enshrined in our Constitution. The ways to amend it, there are 4 ways: citizen petition, a legislative joint resolution, which was what was passed in June by the legislature, and then 2 commissions. There is a Florida Constitution Revision Commission and a Florida Taxation Budget Commission. Now this last one, I'm going to just highlight that the Taxation and Budget Commission meets every 20 years to review our tax code in its entirety, and next year is the year it is scheduled to meet. So that would be the best time, I would argue, to look at our tax code in its entirety. That commission will be meeting in 2027. So any substantive change must go as in a constitution and on the amendment. So in June, the legislature passed HJR 1F. This provides a new homestead exemption for non-school taxes. This means there was a carve-out made during the legislative process for schools, but I really want to emphasize and underscore here, a carve-out was not made for fire and police. So there's some confusion on whether public safety was included. It was not. So that would be an area where, just like all services, you could expect services to be reduced. So phase 1, 2, and 3 is what was outlined in this joint resolution. Phase 1 would triple the current property tax assessment, property tax exemption, homestead exemption from $50,000 to $150,000. That would be on next year's tax bill, so next November. The phase 2 would be 5 times the current assessed value, so for 2028 at the end of the year, that tax bill. So for municipalities that have homes that have lower property values, this will decimate. It's estimated 50% of municipalities would not be able to cover their bill in phase 1, and 80% would not be able to, would be insolvent in phase 2. Phase 3 is a little bit murky in the way that the legislation, the joint resolution was written, but it does describe a full elimination of property taxes over time. So there's ongoing litigation for homeowners that are not permanent residents. As of the last day of this year, if this were to pass, they would not get the 150 or current level of exemption. They would have to live here for 5 years at the current $50,000 exemption. Just make a note of one more caveat in the joint resolution. So after 5 years, they would then be taxed at the same level. So as mentioned, a lot of litigation has been ongoing last month and this month about the language that's going on the ballot. There's litigation going on about both the word choice and the amount of words used. Also questions of whether you can have 2 different taxation categories for your population. The 60% approval is what you need to pass a constitutional amendment. One thing I also want to point out is that there's not an implementing bill that would describe how to achieve this or where the revenue would be made up for. In this large of a scale of policy change, you would expect an implementing bill, but there is not. So the language that is in the joint resolution is all we currently have. So potential implications, this will be if it were to pass, a huge loss of revenue, and with such a drastic loss in revenue, it is reasonable to assume that services would have to be cut potentially across all services. It would be up to each municipality how to handle and which services to reduce. There's also talk of more commercial fees on small business, special assessments, increased sales tax, privatizing services. I think all of this would have to be on the table if we were to make such draconian cuts to our primary source of revenue for our core services. I will show you what the potential exemption under 150. So under the first year, this would be 22 million less than no exemption. So it's probably about triple of what the current exemption is. So 7 million is what the 50,000, 7 million-ish is what $50,000 would roughly be. So that, you can see that's a dramatic increase under your operating budget. Potential exemption loss under $250,000, that phase 2 would be 31 million. And that is our contact information. Myself, Tom Wilmoth, and Abby Ross are here for any constituents that want to visit or have questions. I think it's really essential we just have conversations about what this amendment would look like. I think we all know Floridians are struggling. I think this is not the way to provide relief, and I think there is better ways that Floridians would feel relief sooner and more effectively rather than losing their fire, losing their police, and all kinds of cuts made to core services. So does the commission have any questions or?
Well, first of all, thank you, Representative, for taking time to come and educate us on that. One thing that's flying below the radar that, and correct me if I'm wrong, my recollection of the bill is that it also designates the types of things that cities can spend their money on. I mean, this is the elimination of home rule on steroids. So not only are they restricting the monies that come in, but the state is telling the cities, whatever dollars we get, these are the categories for which you could spend the money. Am I right in recalling that?
Yes, that is a piece of this, is some language around not using towards operating costs and things of that nature. So I think we've been on a glide path towards Tallahassee overreach, and this is a pretty big step towards that.
Thank you. Commissioner Ward.
Thank you so much for coming. I know that you haven't been in your position for very long, but I remember you speaking when you were campaigning about how you wanted to try to see, instead of tax reduction, more attacking insurance rates and seeing how, have you been able to move that forward at all? Has there been any reviews? Because I feel like that is a place that residents are hurting, or the property insurance. And I appreciated you commenting about that when you used to speak during your campaign.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. I do think that is the number one thing facing District 87. I hear that number one when I'm knocking on doors. So I have discussed it. It seems like there is awareness in the legislature that that is a bigger issue. It was not picked up in any of the special sessions that I participated in, but I am hopeful that next session, real reform that provides real relief to families will be tackled. I'll also say I don't disagree that some property tax relief is appropriate, and I think targeted tax relief is a very good idea for the first-time buyer, potentially seniors, targeted relief. But I think to throw away our number one source of revenue is deeply disturbing.
Any other questions, comments? Well, again, Representative, thank you so much for stopping by and educating us on this issue.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll now turn to the consent calendar, item 7.1 for a presentation. We don't normally take comments on presentations. If they want to speak during public comment, they can. Okay, consent calendar, item 7.1, 7.2. Any questions, comments on consent calendar? Hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move approval of the consent calendar.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. We'll now turn to item 8.1, resolution number 186-26, approving First Amendment to Convention Center West Palm Beach Agreement between the City of West Palm Beach Community Redevelopment Agency, City Place Hotel LLC, Palm Beach County, and City Place South Tower 2 LLC. Rothenberg.
Good evening, Mayor, Commission, Ms. Johnson, Kimberly Rothenberg, City Attorney's Office, here this evening presenting resolution number 186-26. This is a companion item to the CRA resolution that you heard and the presentation from Mr. Rugg on item number 2683. The reason for this amendment before you is that the city was a party to an agreement some time ago, together with the CRA, that, among other things, required the garage land that's part of the overall convention center development to remain on the tax rolls. The city and the CRA was approached by the county asking us to forego that provision. The parties had originally agreed that the Hotel 1, the hotel that exists today, would be constructed in the underlying agreement that we're talking about, would be constructed, and that construction would include 120 residential condos with a base value of approximately $32 million. And in lieu of the payment or the taxes that would be generated for that, the parties entered into a pilot agreement accepting payments in lieu of the money that would have been generated there and the requirement for the garage land to remain on the tax roll. So before you tonight is the request to remove that garage land. The resolution 186-26 would authorize the mayor to execute the agreement that's been drafted to do that. We have Mr. Rugg here, we have Mr. Rutter here, and others who can address specific issues with you if you have questions or comments.
Okay, any questions for City Attorney? All right. Do we have any cards on this? Okay, we do have a couple of cards. Michael Zeff and Sergio Piedra. Mr. Zeff?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Michael Zeff, President and CEO of the Chamber of Commerce of the Palm Beaches. This proposal that's before you this evening for the second convention center hotel was thoroughly reviewed by our Government Affairs Committee and our Board of Directors, both of which voted unanimously to endorse this project. This hotel will be a significant tourism asset for our community, and we believe will generate a significant amount of economic development for the city. We urge you to approve it. Thank you.
Thank you. Sergio Piedra.
Mr. Mayor, members of the commission, city staff, I'm Sergio Piedra from Discover the Palm Beaches, Associate Vice President for Intergovernmental Affairs, and a resident of West Palm Beach in the Villages area. So, Discover the Palm Beaches, as you know, stands as a steward of the worldwide brand of the Palm Beaches, and West Palm Beach is part of that brand and has become a huge part of that brand. But we're also a voice for the tourism industry and all of our tourism partners, and the 95,000 people locally here working in that industry. We're the people who believe tourism does work for everyone, and we believe this proposal to develop a second headquarter hotel in the Palm Beach County Convention Center District will continue to bring opportunities to everyone in our community. This hotel will continue to produce a diversity of people coming to business events and meetings. It'll be people coming from our core markets, but it'll be new people coming from new places. And to put it mildly, this will bring us into the top 10 of small, mid-sized market conventions across the country. They'll be coming here. The first place they're gonna see is West Palm Beach. So these are the folks who are gonna be coming here sharing the place we call home. So all across our city, from South Dixie to the Nora, to the waterfront to Northwood, yes, they'll be here on business, but they'll be thinking about coming back on vacation. I can promise you that much. So thank you for being great stewards of the city of West Palm Beach as well. So I could say on a personal note that I've been with Discover the Palm Beaches and Palm Beach County Convention Visitor Bureau before that. I was there when the convention center broke ground. I was there when it opened. I was there when the first headquarter hotel opened up. Now it's great to see a second one so close. So tourism is shining in the Palm Beaches and in West Palm Beach. So I would encourage everyone to keep moving forward. So thank you for this opportunity to speak before you.
Thank you very much. That's all the cards. Any questions or comments? Commissioner Warren.
I believe that an additional convention center hotel is a great opportunity for the city of West Palm Beach. I believe that there are so many advantages that would be associated with this hotel. I believe that a hotel would also be the best use of the space where it will be going. I do believe that the city, the CRA, and the residents of West Palm Beach are stakeholders in this, and that moving forward without negotiating the benefit that offsets the impact to the residents of the city of West Palm Beach is an action that is hasty and warrants more discussion and negotiation.
Any other questions or comments? Commissioner Ward.
I do, but not for Kimberly. Patrick, I'm putting you in the hot seat again, if you don't mind. I know it hasn't been a long time since we just discussed this at the CRA, but I was wondering if there's any more feedback on my request to really try to work with us on some of these transit and mobility issues and what you could potentially provide.
I can absolutely commit to us wanting to talk about transportation issues, work through them. Just speaking with our folks, we're further along even than I thought we were on the expansion, on convention center, working on a site plan. Absolutely here to talk about that and work on that. It's crucial that we keep this one moving, but I can absolutely make the commitment to continue that discussion and be ready for that when we come back with phase 2.
Any other questions or comments? There are no cards, so I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move approval of resolution number 186-26.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign.
Nay.
All right, so let me do by show of hands because my hearing's bad. All those in favor of the motion, just hold up your hand. So 1, 2, 3. All those opposed. All right, so the vote passes 3-2. Okay. Thank you. Item 9.1, public hearing and second reading of ordinance number 5148-25, granting the Florida Public Utilities Company a non-exclusive franchise for a period of 30 years to sell, distribute, transport, and transmit natural, manufactured, or mixed gas in the city of West Palm Beach. Ms. Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, members in the audience, and those joining us by television. For the record, Faye Johnson, City Administrator for the City of West Palm Beach. And Mayor, as you articulated, the ordinance 5148-25 before you is for second reading, but I would like to put into context the sequence at which the board has heard, or we have attempted to get the board's consideration and final approval of this item. Back on March 30th, 2026, the first reading of the ordinance was passed by the commission. It was brought back for second reading on April 13th, 2022. Second reading of the ordinance failed in that the board had questions regarding the collection of franchise fees that were believed to be owed to the city, and that is in dispute with Florida Public Utilities. We worked through a number of the related issues that had been brought up, and then brought the ordinance back, which would have been second reading, but it was the third time that it appeared on the agenda before you on June 8th of 2026. At the last minute, the Friday before Monday's commission meeting, we had a request from FPU to revise the definition of gross revenue, and rather than try to revise it on the floor, the decision was made to pull the item off the agenda for further staff review and to work through that last issue. So by way of background, when we look at the collected franchise fee and the franchise fee dispute, as has been articulated in discussion with the board individually as well as first reading, the initial ordinance 23-1989 was adopted by the commission in 1989, and it established the methodology for collecting the franchise fee. That methodology prescribes 6% of FPU's gross revenues minus their ad valorem and tangible taxes. So when we look at the history of what the city has collected between fiscal year 09 and fiscal year 18, we received a total amount of franchise fee payments of $1.6 million plus. The Ordinance 23-1989 expired in 2019, and since that time, the city and FPU have continued operating under the expired ordinance. So when we look at the 7 intervening years since expiration of the ordinance, in fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22, we have received a total payment of $108,000 plus. When we move on and look at the other 5 years during that 7-year intervening period, fiscal year 19 and 20, fiscal years 23, 24, and 25, we have not received franchise fee payments from FPU on the basis that their contention is that what they have paid in ad valorem and tangible taxes actually exceeded the franchise payments. So if you look back at the original methodology in the ordinance, it required 6% of their gross revenue and gave them credit for ad valorem taxes and tangible taxes, and therein lies the essence of the dispute. City staff is currently working on obtaining the bank records for those years so that we can confirm whether or not, in fact, what they paid in ad valorem and tangible taxes actually exceed the 6% of their revenue. However, I want to point out that the dispute does not impact the new franchise ordinance if the board were to approve it and it is adopted. If that happens to be the decision of the board, the new ordinance eliminates the existing methodology for collecting franchise payment, and therein it would increase the revenue to the general fund, and given the new provisions in the ordinance, it would enable us to help prevent future payment disputes. So taking a look at what is codified in the ordinance. Again, Ordinance 514825 that is proposed, it would replace the expired Ordinance 23-1989, which was originally adopted in 1989. This ordinance, like the previous one, does grant Florida Public Utilities a non-exclusive right to sell, distribute, transport, and transmit natural gas in the city. It provides for a 30-year franchise term with one optional 10-year renewal. It established the fees, critically important, based on 6% of FPU's gross revenue without credit for ad valorem intangible taxes. The ordinance set forth quarterly payments. The schedule of the quarterly payments is laid out before you. It has specific due dates by which the payments must be made. If they are not made within a 30-day period of the prescribed date, there is a 12% penalty built into the ordinance, which was not in the initial ordinance. So if we look at fiscal year 2026, given that we are operating under the old ordinance, we have not to date received franchise fee revenue because they're still operating under that premise of what they're paying in taxes and the credit that nothing is owed to the city. If it were to be adopted tonight by the board, they would then be under the new requirement, just a flat 6% of the revenue. So for the last quarter, July through September, the payment due on October 1st, we project that we would be owed a ballpark of about $150,000 for that quarter. So by way of the franchise fee audit that was done back in 2003, we consulted with the internal auditor, and a number of the provisions in the audit report back in 2020 are actually provisions are codified within the ordinance that is before you tonight for your consideration. And I want to recognize the internal auditor for her cooperation and working with us in strengthening the ordinance so that we don't be in a predicament that we find ourselves in prior to. So the ordinance, it grants the city auditing rights. It requires FPU to annually submit backup documentation supporting the payment calculations. And then again, it removed the prior ordinance provision allowing Florida Public Utilities to reduce the franchise fee payment to the city based on their ad valorem and tangible taxes. And again, this would result in a greater amount of franchise fee paid to the city. In addition, it adds a 15% penalty if Florida Public Utilities is found to be improperly paying the city, provisions we did not have in the expired ordinance. Moving right along, if you look at Section 8B of the ordinance, that's where it codifies the language about allowing for an audit up to 5 years of their records and our right to examine those records related to the calculation of the franchise payments. If we were to move on to Section 8.D, that's where it codifies the language that specifies the 15% penalty should Florida Public Utility underpay the city in franchise fees. And if we look at Section 14A and B, that language actually clarifies in terms of public records requirements. So we want to make certain that where public record information is protected on city residents' gas consumption, that in the course of what they provide to us, that information is shielded so that no public record violations are committed. And then we were to look at Section 19. Section 19 actually codifies in this ordinance that the city does not waive its rights or obligations, and nor does Florida Public Utility to still look at the payment of the franchise fee that were due under the expired ordinance number 23, 1998. And then since the June 8th meeting where the ordinance will pull because of the revision to the gross revenue definition, that section has been modified and is updated in the ordinance that is before you tonight. So by way at looking at an option, if the board's pleasure is to not move forward, I want to just put in the record that Florida Public Utility is currently the only natural gas provider we have within our corporate limits. They service just under 8,000 customers, 7,991. So again, if it were to be revoked by requirement, we have to provide a 30-day notice of discontinuation of the franchise. Under Florida statute, we have to purchase FPU's infrastructure and or identify and negotiate with the new gas provider to provide the services, which the city is not in a position to do that. In terms of the breakdown of the almost 8,000 customers, 7,192 are residential customers. The other 799 are non-residential customers. So there would be an impact to be felt. With that, Mayor, members of the commission, it is staff recommendation for approval of ordinance number 514825 on second reading, and I'm glad to take any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Any questions, comments? Commissioner Fox?
Thank you so much. Would you mind going back to slide number, I think it was page 10, talking about the 15% penalty for underpayment?
Slide.
Okay.
Slide 10, yes.
So, thank you. So I just wanted to clarify something about the auditor's responsibility here. I think you mentioned when we talked about this last week something about it doesn't necessarily fall on the auditor to have to audit this organization every year, that there might be someone else on staff that could take this over to, I mean, I just want to ensure that we are getting the payments we're supposed to be getting. I mean, why wouldn't we know we were getting them at the time we got them? Why would, I want to understand what this means in terms of how often we're going to be auditing them to make sure that they're paying on time and properly.
We have not set a definitive auditing schedule in place. The way that the language is written, it provides for either our internal auditor to do it, or the city can contract out with an external auditing firm to do it. The way that it is styled, it gives us that flexibility. Now, in terms of the amount of information that they submit to us at the time that payments are made, we have it structured in the same manner that we do with other entities that submit payments to the city. I mean, they submit those payments to us. We operate on a trusted relationship that the information is accurate, and then at some time on a designated schedule, we then go out and audit it. And so in talking with finance staff, they wanted to keep it on that same type of model, and so that's why we crafted it in the manner that we did.
Commissioner Ward?
Thank you, and thank you for going back and negotiating further on our behalf. I might have misunderstood this in the prior conversation I had, but I thought that it was designed that if the finance department was going to be reviewing it, it wouldn't all be on our auditor's office. That actually, because I mean, technically you're looking at finance documents, so I'm assuming that the finance department would be able to do an audit of those statements, not just have it to go to Beverly's department.
Right, it could be our internal auditor, an external auditor, or the finance department. Yes, it could be one or the other.
Okay.
The ordinance just does not say specifically it's going to be the internal auditor or the finance, because we need that flexibility.
Any other, Commissioner Warren?
Okay, for point of clarification, did they make a payment to the city for the fee that was outlined in the arrangement? In the
For
agreement?
which fee?
The 15%?
No, that would be in effect if this ordinance were to be approved. It was not in the expired ordinance.
Did they make a payment for the amount that that they had not paid before, the underpayment? Did they make that?
No, that dispute is still taking place. You know, what we have focused on is trying to get a new ordinance in agreement with Florida Public Utilities. So there's been quite a bit of negotiations back and forth. The amount that is in dispute, again, we preserve the right to still look at that. And if this ordinance were to be adopted, then we would shift and then start looking at getting the data from those records. But as we speak right now, that disputed amount is still on the table. So they have not yet paid anything, because their position is they don't owe us anything, because what they paid in property tax and tangible taxes exceed the 6% of the gross revenue. We want to see the data, and they may be accurate, but until we get all of the data at the table and then confirm it, you know, there is a dispute.
Do we have measures that we're proposing in the event that there's a discrepancy again, or a difference in opinion of what is due to the city? How would we recover this fee, the 15% fee, or any other variances?
Moving forward?
Moving forward.
If I may, this is like a contract. It's a franchise ordinance, but by virtue of FPU accepting it, it's a contract. It's obligation between the city and the franchisor. If we have a dispute and we can't resolve it at the table, then it would be like any other enforcement of a contract. We would argue that they owe us. We'd go to court and have the court decide whether or not they do or don't owe us under the terms of the agreement.
Thank you.
President Peduzzi?
I just wanted to confirm, and I think you've already answered this, but, and this might be for the city attorney, but there won't be any argument that they could make of waiver of our right to collect those past due balances if indeed they have a balance by us passing this ordinance today.
Well, we put specifically in the waiver provision of the ordinance that's before you, a provision that says neither party waives the rights to collect whatever our rights are of any past due amounts, and the languages.
Thank you, I must have missed that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
And that's section 19 of the ordinance.
Any other questions or comments? We have any cards? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move approval of ordinance 5148-25 on second reading.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion? Hearing none. Madam Clerk, can you read the ordinance, please?
Ordinance number 5148-25, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of West Palm Beach, Florida, granting to Florida Public Utilities Companies, its successors and assigns a non-exclusive franchise for a period of 30 years to sell, distribute, transport, and transmit natural manufactured or mixed gas in the city of West Palm Beach, Florida, prescribing the terms and conditions under which said franchise may be exercised, making findings, providing severability, providing an effective date upon final passage, and repealing prior ordinance.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you.
I would like to thank the board for the adoption of the ordinance, and again, thank the internal auditor for working with us, as well as the city attorney's office, our finance staff. We had cooperation from our public utilities staff, as well as Florida Public Utilities. So this was truly a coordinated effort to get this ordinance updated and get it adopted. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll now turn to item 10.1, Public hearing and first reading of ordinance number 5179-26 regarding the City Place Commercial Plan Development to adopt development regulations for the Convention Center District and Hotel 2 subarea, and to transfer those development regulations and all future major amendments to resolution number 156-26, and discussion of resolution number 156-26 regarding a major plan development amendment to the City Place Commercial Plan Development to formally designate or identify the Convention Center District and Hotel 2 subarea, and to establish the development regulations for said subarea, and discussion of resolution number 157-26 regarding a major plan development amendment to the City Place Commercial Plan Development for a Level 3 site plan review of an 18-story, 400-room hotel with waivers within the Hotel 2 subarea. This request is submitted by Tyler Woolsey of Schutz & Bowen LLP on behalf of City Place South Tower 2 LLC for the property generally located at 900 South Rosemary Avenue. Who's presenting on this item?
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Rothenberg. I believe as a quasi-judicial item, we may need to swear in speakers.
Oh, you know, I do need swearing in, yes. It's been a long time since I've done this. Okay, Commissioners, I need all of your declarations, please. We'll begin with you, Madam, Mr. President.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yes, absolutely. I'm sorry.
Mayor, as to item 10.1, I have had ex parte communications with the applicant and the county. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit, nor have I received any expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made a part of the record.
Commissioner Fox.
As to item 10.1, I have had ex parte communications with the applicant. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have not made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Thank you, Mayor. As to this matter, I have had ex parte communications with the applicant and the county. I have not received written communications. I have not conducted an investigation. I have made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Commissioner Warren.
Thank you, Mayor. As to ordinance number 5179-26, I have had ex parte communications with representatives of the applicant and representatives of the county. I have not received written communications, not conducted an investigation, not made a site visit, not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Commissioner Ward.
As to matter 10.1, I have had ex parte communications with representatives of the applicant and representatives of the county. I have received written communications in the form of emails. I have not conducted an investigation. I have made a site visit. I have not received expert opinions. I request that these disclosures and all written communications be made part of the record.
Thank you. Madam Clerk, can you swear in all witnesses, please?
Would everyone wishing to speak on item 10.1 please stand and raise your right hand? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Okay, very good. Now, who is presenting on this item? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Mayor, Commissioners, Ms. Johnson, Ms. Rothenberg, thank you all for the opportunity this evening to present this project. I know you've heard a couple related items this evening, but I have the pleasure of presenting the fun stuff and showing you the design of the project and speaking through the iterative process that we've worked on with your city staff.
Could you state your name and address for the record, please?
Sorry, Mayor.
Okay.
Tyler Woolsey with Schutz & Bowen on behalf of the applicant. Thank you.
Okay.
So I do have a little bit of information that may be repetitive. I'll breeze through that and get to the meat of the substance of these applications. As you noted, what's on the docket for vote tonight is the first reading of the ordinance, but I will be presenting the resolutions that come along with that. And I'll explain the organization of those here in a moment. Just to make sure that everyone is on the same page, well, first let me show the slideshow so everybody can see that. Thank you. And apologies, looks like there might be some formatting issues that happen there. The site here is on the south side of the downtown. You see it represented by the red star there. I'll also note that it is within the City Place CPD. Naturally, within the downtown, typically the City Commission would not see site plan approvals. Typically, that's under the purview of the Downtown Action Committee. However, as a planned development, everything within the City Place CPD is under the purview of the City Commission, which is why we're here tonight for these 3 applications. Showing you a little bit more of the specific context of the site. You see the site outlined there, center screen in red, and some of the surrounding uses. As mentioned, we are in the Convention Center pod, just on the south side of Rosemary, within the downtown, bordering that south edge of our downtown. Here, getting even closer into our site, you start to see the existing conditions. It is a surface parking lot. Today, the site acts as the off-site valet lot for the existing Hilton connected to the Convention Center, and I'll speak to what's happening to their parking here in a moment. To the north side of us, we have the City Place South condominium, about 420-unit condo building there, the Hilton Hotel and the Convention Center to our west, along with the Convention Center garage to our southwest. To the south of us, across L Street, is the Convention Center townhomes, the last grouping of properties within the actual downtown boundaries. And then south of the Convention Center townhomes, you have the start of the Grandview Heights neighborhood. So as mentioned, you've heard a couple times, this is a public-private partnership with the county. We are very excited because the county saw increased utilization over 55% with the original Hilton. We're expecting similar boost here. And so again, I'll breeze through some of these benefits as you've heard them a couple times today. Getting to the summary of what we're here to speak about on this item, primarily Ordinance 5179-26. This is structured as an ordinance in 2 resolutions because the ordinance has to amend that City Place CPD that I mentioned, and what we are doing is establishing the Convention Center District. So within the City Place CPD, there are multiple sub-districts. The Convention Center District has been, a stepchild neglected for these years, and so we are officially bringing it in. And with Resolution 15626, we are establishing sub-area development regulations for that Convention Center District, specifically for the hotel site here tonight. And then lastly, speaking to Resolution 15726, which is the site plan implementing those regulations. Here, just briefly to note that the future land use is the Urban Central Business District within the downtown. That is the consistent land use throughout every property. And we are part of the commercial plan development, as mentioned. Now, speaking to this plan development amendment, the City Place CPD was originally formed back in 1989. What that did is, as a plan development and a development of regional impact, it established a pool of development rights. And what DRIs are historically known for, the operative function of a DRI, is to create that development pool based on a limiting factor of traffic trips. So obviously traffic is a huge discussion in our city today. It has been historically, and that's exactly what DRIs have historically worked to implement, is large-scale, long-term, multi-phase master plan developments with a recognition that the infrastructure needs to come before the project. And so I'll speak a little bit more to what that means for the traffic associated with this project, but bottom line up front, the traffic associated with this has already been baked into our infrastructure planning for more than 30 years as part of that DRI. Now, as we've moved through development of the City Place CPD, every time we bring in a new pod, we institute development regulations. And the process looks like similar to what you might imagine as a unique rezoning of a planned development outside of the downtown, where you're creating those specific dimensional regulations. We are, as the applicant, with your city's planning and zoning staff. And so we've worked for about 2 years with city staff on creating those specific development regulations to guide whatever happens on this property. Should this hotel not come to fruition, the site plan not pass, the development regulations that are proposed have been created strictly to ensure that any development here in the future is contextual and compatible with the surrounding area. We essentially utilize some of the existing development regulations, parameters, and architectural features throughout the rest of the downtown, and we voluntarily implement them here as appropriate regulations within the City Place CPD. And so, here there are no regulations for the site or the Convention Center District, and that's exactly what these applications look to implement. This development regulations table, this first half of it, likely is familiar to you. This is set up in the same format with many of the same regulations that you see throughout the downtown sub-districts. We are instituting an FAR limit. We are instituting height limits in a tiered fashion, making sure that all elements of the building address their neighbors accordingly, height for height. We implement setbacks, both minimum and maximum setbacks, as well as conditional setbacks should there be parking and where the building goes above a certain building height. And then we create lot area coverage. All of these holistically, along with the architectural standards that we work in collaboration with staff, are aimed to control the massing of the building, making sure that the mass of the building preserves light and air through the site, and again, respects the context of our surrounding area and the existing development pattern. Here you see the balance of that table, requirements for public and private open space areas, requirements for active use, which is common throughout the downtown, as well as that ground floor transparency requirement. So as it relates to the ordinance and the amendment to the City Place CPD in of itself, the gist of that is fairly simple. We are creating that convention center subdistrict, and we are setting the City Place CPD up for the regulations that you'll see in the resolutions that implement the site plan. So as it relates to that ordinance and the amendment to City Place CPD, we believe we comply with all the applicable standards that you see here, and the city staff report confirms that they agree with that. Now, moving into what I think is the more fun aspect of this, starting to get to take a look at the building and talking about how we got to where we are with this design. So the development program, briefly, is a 400-unit hotel. It is proposed as a curio collection by Hilton. So the most comparable you might think of is the Autograph series by Marriott, which here locally is the Bin Hotel. So it is an upper-level, business-oriented style of hotel. We are providing a true mixed-use development here with about 7,400 square feet of restaurants split between a breakfast and lunch restaurant on our second level at the amenity deck, as well as a signature dining experience at the rooftop on the east side of the building. In addition to that restaurant space, we have a little grab-and-go market for convention center goers and our guests, as well as about just under 21,000 square feet of event meeting space programmed within the building. And a huge part of this, an important part that I'll speak to further in a few slides, is the off-site parking in the county's garage. And I think that comes up right here. So I want to first say that the existing parking lot, again, is the valet parking lot for the existing Hilton. All of that parking, as well as all of the required parking for the proposed hotel, is going to come to live within the existing county convention center garage right next door to the southwest of this piece of property. So you might be asking, is there enough parking spaces in that garage? You know, when we have huge conventions and all the activity that goes on, do we have enough spaces to take those spaces for our hotels? And the answer is a resounding yes. The county has completed their own studies. Here we're referencing numbers from the most recent December 2019 study. You see there more than 2,600 parking spaces and an existing peak occupancy about around 25%. Now that study analyzes what were to happen if we were to incorporate all of the existing Hilton, a 500-unit hotel, so 100 more units than what we're proposing, and the county's planned expansion for their garage. In that scenario, all of those additional uses work out to be just over 70% at peak occupancy, peak utilization of that garage. So we are very confident between ourselves, the county, that even with this moving all of the hotel parking into the garage, there is still more than sufficient supply for that future expansion should we see increased success beyond all of our dreams. So with that being said, I take you to the site plan, and we're going to start to walk around the site and walk through some of the massing evolution. Here you start to see that ground floor, well, our site plan in context with the building. Again, Rosemary on our west side, Kiwi Street, which is a private driveway easement that we split half and half with City Place South Tower to our north, Alabama Avenue to our east, and then L Street to our south. I'll start with a quick walk around the ground floor experience in the landscape plan. So you can see here, we are working to improve all 4 facades. We are bringing the entire site up to the city's downtown streetscape standards, which means expanded sidewalks, significant street trees, shade trees, as well as accent plantings and palms. We worked closely with staff, particularly on the east side along the Rosemary frontage, to ensure we were providing those canopy trees to create that shade experience where we want our primary pedestrian activity to live in this corridor. You see there on that northeastern side of the site where we have programmed an open space plaza. So that is a public plaza with some outdoor seating, again, significant shade, and it's hidden by some of the landscaping, but we are providing public bike racks as well as a micro-mobility station there to take the form of whatever the city's evolution of our mobility program would look like to ensure we have a space there. The other thing that I'll call out on this slide is the oversized valet drive that you see on the north side of the property. And so there, that large valet, and I'll speak to this in detail, towards the end of this presentation, but we have particularly programmed that drive on the north side because the code does not allow us to have a driveway from Rosemary. So we are necessarily dictated on the location of our driveway. But in doing so, what we work to do is basically utilize that entire frontage, that north frontage, to create this very large entry experience so that should we have an extreme peak of activity, we have significant queuing and capacity in those valet lanes. And again, I'll show you more detail on that here in a moment. But for now, we move up to the amenity deck here on our second level. We show you this briefly just to show this is our private open space, again, a code requirement, which comes along with additional requirements for percentage of shade coverage, percentage of vegetation. And so we are meeting and complying and exceeding with all of the zoning standards here. Now here, getting into a little bit of a color concept to see the project in better form, you start to see how the programming of the design breaks up a little bit, and I'll explain why that is. As you might imagine, in a dual function type of space where you have a hotel and you have some event space, you want those guests that are dedicated to one or the other use to know where they need to enter and how they can circulate to the area they're looking to go to. So we are necessarily, in the design, stacking that event space, which ends up being about 3 to 4 stories of event space with dual height ceiling, working up to an 80-foot building height. So what you see there in blue rises to about 80 feet in building height. Our amenity deck, we maintain about 22 feet of building height, so effectively the height of a 1 to 2 story building. We do have 3-story townhomes on the south of us. We did not want to create this towering form adjacent to those 3-story townhomes. So this amenity deck lives basically at their roof line, so creating a situation where we're not creating a privacy issue for one area or the other. And then here you see the vertical stacking of the hotel. And I show this really to point out that the vertical element of our project, the hotel tower, which rises to about 204 feet, is limited to, one, it's pushed to the west side of the site, and it's limited to about 30% of the property. And so while the ground floor podium does occupy about just over 80% of the property, that vertical element, the part that goes tall, we have worked to minimize that and minimize the width of that tower. I'll show you here in a second how the massing has evolved really in respect to our most adjacent neighbors. So here, this is some of the information I was just speaking to, and this leads to the point that I just mentioned in that we worked very hard to understand the context. This process started back in 2004, this site plan and this code iterative process with staff. And so as we started that process, the first thing that we did is we looked at what the heights and the massing were around us. First, we looked at City Place South Tower to our north. You can see on the screen, and you'll see better in a rendering here in a moment, the tall portion of City Place South Tower, the tallest part of their building, lives on, adjacent to us at least, lives on the west side of their site, where their tower rises to about 206 feet. Our property starts to slope down, the elevation starts to slope down from them, so we are proposing a building height about 204 feet, which puts our building height, it looks just about where they are in the renderings because you can't see a couple feet, but we're just shy of their building height. And what we've done is we made sure that that vertical element, in pushing it to the west, preserves the views and minimizes any shade impact, and frankly, it negates any potential shade impact on their amenity deck, but also all the folks in that westernmost stack of City Place South Tower we've minimized any adjacent view impacts. And here, we start to see some of the separation that we looked at, separation from the North City Place South Tower. We are, necessarily working, like for like in an urban setting with City Place South Tower. They are, a condo development about 420 units, an FAR of about 6.5, where our project came in at about 4.1 of an FAR. So we work to reduce the massing from what would have been, could have been a much larger structure. And in doing so, we also work to step that building height down. So if we work clockwise from the hotel at 204 feet to the event ballroom at 80 feet and then dropping down to that amenity deck to only 22 feet at the grade of that deck, you see how we've worked to create that like for like. Where we have an 80-foot event hall, we match with the 80-foot portion of City Place South Tower to our north. Where we have the 3-story townhomes to our south, we work to minimize our building height and the massing adjacent to them. you start to see some of the separation. We've got about 45 feet across L Street from those convention center townhomes. And we've got about 125 feet from the closest point of our building to some of the closest lots in Grandview. About 250 feet from that taller portion of the event hall. And here you really start to see that massing alignment that I was mentioning. So you see how the tall portion of our building, that vertical element of our building, really matches up in the north-south dimension with City Place South Tower to our north, effectively preventing us from creating any shade impacts, any view impacts from that western stack or their amenity deck. You then see how where City Place South Tower steps down to about 80 feet, our event ballroom steps down to about 80 feet max height. And then again, you see where our podium steps down even further there. So here you can get a section view of that same thing. This is looking from the east at Alabama Street. One thing that I'll point out here again, there is a bit of a grade difference. So where we have a building height of 80 feet, it is about 10 feet shy of their 80-foot building height because our base elevation starts a bit lower. You do see the dramatic step down from that 80-foot height event hall to the very low amenity deck that we've created there at 1 story. And I stop here to point out that this would not be possible but for our ability to use that off-site parking. As you've seen with countless developments in the city, anytime, frankly, that you are bringing a development forward, almost any time you are providing your parking on site. The nature of this use as a hotel allows us to decouple that parking from our site, and specifically the nature of this as a convention center hotel allows us to decouple that because of that existing parking infrastructure. Should this project have been developed with any other use, which any use permitted in the downtown, residential, office, other mix of uses, all permitted, it would have necessarily required a parking podium to sustain the parking. The residential has to have their parking on site. Your office has to have your parking on site to be marketable. So we really do feel, for a number of reasons, that being one of them, that this hotel use is the highest and best use here on this piece of property. Here, I'm moving around the building, so now we're on the north facade. Again, this is our driveway entry that you see here, Rosemary to the right-hand side of the screen. Moving over to the west facade, you're looking from the west, looking as if you're standing on Rosemary or standing outside of the convention center entrance. You see City Place South Tower to the left-hand side of the screen. You see the activation of both the dual levels of landscaping proposed there on the street, from the shade trees up to the large palms accenting Rosemary, continuing that same landscaping palette that exists throughout the balance of Rosemary. And here, I keep you on that Rosemary frontage to talk about one of our first waivers. Now again, this is informational as it relates to the resolutions tonight, but I want to make sure that you understand everything that's involved with this project. So while you might be asking yourself, why are you asking for waivers when you're proposing the regulations as part of this same effort? Well, as I mentioned at the start of this presentation, what we've done is we've worked with staff to be conservative in creating these regulations. We want to make sure that should anything happen to this specific project, the regulations that are established for this piece of property require the same high level of architecture and high caliber of compatibility that you would expect for any other property throughout the downtown. And so what we've done is we have committed to, within the zoning regulations, effectively equivalent regulations to what you would see in the downtown core. Now, naturally, being on the very south end of downtown in a bit of an, call it an isolated pod, within the convention center, things necessitate a little bit of wiggle room. And so we are asking for a couple different waivers, 2 related to the active use. This is the first one that you see here on Rosemary. And specifically what I'm showing you here is where we have written in a requirement for 60% active use on levels 2 all the way up to 6. Here on level 2, we have 2 areas. One that you see center screen there that's not in the yellow. That is actually where we're hiding a mechanical well for a kitchen that lives behind in what is that activated space that serves that level 2 restaurant. And then on the right-hand side of that red box, you see where we do have a stairwell and a little bit of mechanical space and some bathrooms where that is not true active use because there is not clear glass visibility in and out of the building. As you can see, the facade maintains a consistent appeal. It continues to look and feel as if this was an active use facade and a consistent facade all the way through, but it is technically not active use in those limited areas. So we are asking for a 16% reduction in that active use requirement only on level 2. On levels 3 through 6, where we also have that 60% requirement, we're providing 68% active use on all of those levels. And so doing some quick math, taking those 4 levels in aggregate, that's about 32% more active use than what we would have to provide. And we're asking for a 16% reduction only on level 2. So effectively, we are providing on levels 3 through 6, double what we're asking to reduce on level 2. Now, moving down to the south facade, this is the L Street facade. You are looking, excuse me, from the south north at the building. And we also have a similar waiver request here. Now, the nature of this waiver request is more so operational in working to guide the pedestrian as they come into this area to remain along the activated Rosemary frontage. We have over-designed that pedestrian experience to prioritize that pedestrian route on Rosemary, and so we don't necessarily want to encourage pedestrians to walk east on L Street, where you're effectively walking towards the back of house of our podium and towards the train tracks. There is nothing over on the east side that anyone would be walking to go do. And so what we're asking for is a reduction, a 10.5% reduction there on L Street on that ground floor facade, so that we activate that corner cap where the building wraps from Rosemary to L Street and keep that activity along the Rosemary frontage in order to draw pedestrians from the north up along Rosemary and those that are coming out of the convention center and circulating over on that Rosemary side. Now, getting into everyone's favorite topic. I told you we talk a little bit about parking, and I spoke a little bit about it at the top of the meeting, but I want to show you some of the details of how this shakes out. So this table that you see here is effectively the tracking schedule of development within the City Place DRI. And you see how it begins with that initial development order, establishing that pool of development rights. And then over the years, you shift and you push and you pull and you move things between categories using a traffic equivalency factor to make sure that if you're taking, say, 1,000 square feet of residential and you're turning it into a dwelling unit, those numbers work out like for like. And so what you see here is a proposed reduction of about 36,000 square feet of retail from our DRI pool and the addition of 250 hotel rooms. There's 150 in the pool right now. With that 250, that provides the 400 that we're proposing with this project. And so then you see at that bottom row of the table, the balance remaining within the DRI. Now, some of the project traffic considerations here. Again, the biggest one is that the DRI prevents that overall increase in total traffic. Naturally, we all know going from a parking lot to a development, there are going to be traffic trips associated with that. But again, those traffic trips have been from the beginning, from 1989 when this DRI was approved, the infrastructure planning has accounted for those traffic trips. So that conversion methodology ensures that we remain equivalent with those traffic trips. And then we start to think about the specific hotel use. We really do feel that that hotel use is the highest and best use for this piece of property for many reasons. A couple as already mentioned. One very important related to traffic is that hotel traffic peaks outside of the typical AM, PM peak hour that you see for your standard uses that congests Okeechobee today. Your residential and your office uses necessarily have peak hour traffic during everyone's peak hour when we are all commuting. Hotel uses, as many of you likely have experienced, are looking at later checkout times, 10, 11 o'clock checkout times, and check-in times in the early afternoon. So folks are typically leaving. The majority of our traffic is happening between the AM and PM peak hour traffic. And so while it's no doubt that a new development creates more traffic on the road, it's important to realize this traffic's already been accounted for in our infrastructure planning for over 30 years. And that this use provides the minimum peak hour traffic, which is what creates that congestion that we all feel in Okeechobee. Now, I also point out the specific nature of this hotel in conjunction with the convention center has additional benefits. Namely, we can have convention attendees coming in the day before, 2 days before to enjoy the city. And what that does is it alleviates the 1,000+ trips of cars coming into the convention center the morning of the convention. You know, we heard earlier today during the CRA event, a couple thousand folks expected for the Tony Robbins event. You might imagine that when this hotel comes online and there are sufficient hotel rooms and bookings, that you could have a significant portion of those folks arrive the day before and be on site the morning of the convention, walking 200 feet across the street rather than driving in on Okeechobee when we're all trying to get to work. Second to that, the City Place adjacency, the convention center district, and the nature of this convention center district within our downtown the transit improvements that we are all working towards and the pedestrian improvements that we've specifically proposed here are going to result in a high rate of internal capture. What that means is that somebody that comes to the hotel, staying at the hotel, whether they're staying for business at the convention center or otherwise, they are likely to take our transit services, to take an Uber, or to walk into City Place and to use other areas of our city rather than get in their vehicle and drive everywhere they want to go. And then lastly, again, speaking to the specific traffic impacts of the project, this area is activated and accessed through the Rosemary and Okeechobee intersection. It's a signalized intersection, and that naturally is where traffic of the convention center, the hotels, and City Place South Tower spill out and access Okeechobee. So when we look at the worst case scenario in our traffic study, which always uses conservative estimates, we are looking at a less than 3-second increase in your wait time for anyone using that signal. So a nominal increase to any traffic flow that occurs in this area. And again, a big part of that is due to our off-peak hour traffic. And then lastly, I'll point out, the CRA mentioned a few times today the transit efforts. We are coordinating closely with Jessica Keller, the city's parking and mobility director, on TDM strategies. The nature of this project is such that we are expecting a guest shuttle to be able to help facilitate airport traffic to and from our hotel. We are going to be part of that city's transit program. We will be contributing our mobility impact fees, which will go to help fund the new transit system, the micromobility system rather. We have provided that micromobility station on site, so we do have a point of service for whatever system the city elects to use for that microtransit service. And then we've made some significant enhancements to the pedestrian realm, neglecting no side of this building, treating every side of this as if it's in the true urban fabric, with widened sidewalks, additional street trees, and improved crossings, which I'll speak to here in just a few moments. So I show you some of that site access and circulation in a little bit more detail here, and apologies if it's difficult to see some of those colors. Effectively, what we're showing is our vehicular circulation is coming south on Rosemary, coming onto Kiwi, and then circulates through our oversized driveway on the north side of the site. Now I'll point out that driveway we've programmed to be 2-lane, but it is ingress only on the west side where our folks will be coming in, and then egress to the east. And so folks will naturally circulate in and out in a one-way pattern. All of the traffic associated with this, all of our guests will be served by valet. And so we necessarily had to provide a valet operation plan that's been thoroughly reviewed through a few iterations. We work with city staff to make sure that our queuing, our stacking, and the way that valet operation integrates all the way down to the timing of the service, of how quick those valet attendants are coming and going to get your cars, and how many valet attendants we need to have at any one time. So we work through thorough details of that valet operation plan with your city staff and your city's traffic consultant. You see some of that circulation pattern. You also see some of that access in the green and orange on the right-hand side of the screen from Alabama. That is where we have our effectively back-of-house service entrance, where all of our service, loading, and back-of-house operations occur within the podium. Nothing is happening out on the street here. Everything has been internalized in order to screen visually. And so as you move around the site, you see valet circulates there to the south and to the west into the garage. And then in blue, you see the pedestrian routes that have been created. And particularly, I'll point out to the southwest, the bottom left-hand side of your screen, you see the blue line that runs off screen to the south. That is, and I believe you might have heard a public comment at CRA earlier, there is an existing tunnel, a cut-through the Convention Center townhomes there, which many people today use to access from the Grandview Heights neighborhood up north along Rosemary into City Place. And so we heard about that back in 24 when this process started, and we've had significant conversations about that and how we can prioritize pedestrian safety with respect to that access, the additional pedestrian activity that we'll create with this hotel, and the valet operations that you'll see. And so I'll speak to that here in one moment. Before I do that, a little bit more detail on the driveway that we've proposed, and specifically a waiver associated with that driveway. Now, what you're seeing here gets a little bit technical, but I'm going to keep it high level and basically qualify the driveway corner clearance occurs when you have two public right-of-ways intersecting. There is a minimum separation that you want before you have your first driveway because you don't want cars backing out onto the street blocking that intersection. And so where the code would require 50 feet, We're providing 43 feet and 4 inches, but it's important to note, one, that Kiwi is a private driveway easement. So technically, this is not two streets intersecting. This is our private driveway easement intersecting with one street. So in a sense, Kiwi is the access point, and Kiwi itself does comply with driveway corner clearance standards. But to be conservative, we treated our access off of Kiwi as if it were that true access point off of a right-of-way. And so what you see here, I show you the queuing and the stacking to show that we have far more than the necessary stacking. You know, at peak condition, we expect 6 cars. We have space for more than 9 cars before you ever start to get close to stacking out on the street. But I also use this graphic to show we're requesting that the 6-foot 8-inch reduction there. That is effectively half of that dual drive lane that we've proposed. So in working with staff, we looked at design iterations that if we were to pinch that driveway in to only 1 lane ingress, there's a world where we could comply with the technical letter of the code. However, that negatively impacts the true circulation of the site. As you might imagine, as we pinch that down, folks go slower, folks move into that space slower, and it creates slower circulation into our property. And so in working with the city's traffic consultant, we all worked to the end point that this design was preferable in terms of the overall flow, taking everything into account. And here I want to speak to some of those pedestrian safety improvements that I mentioned. So we've worked closely with some of the adjacent residents over the last couple months as we've been getting ready to come before you and to come before Planning Board last month or 2 months ago. And the number one issue that we heard about was pedestrian safety. And so you'll see here in a few moments a series of voluntary conditions of approval that we've proposed, but I think these are the most important to speak to. And there's really 3 groupings here that we can talk about. So as mentioned on the south side, so coming from the bottom of the page up, you see there in yellow what we show across L Street is we've proposed a raised crosswalk with RRFBs, which are rapid reflecting flashing beacons. That is the pedestrian style signal that you see when you're about to cross the road. You hit the button, there's mid-block and on each side flashing beacons that alert drivers to pedestrians walking across the street. So not only do we create that raised crosswalk there, which 1, serves as a dedicated pedestrian route, 2, serves as a traffic calming measure. As a vehicle approaches, they necessarily have to slow down because it is a raised crosswalk. And so we do that in 2 places there on the south side of the property to create what we're calling a primary pedestrian route. You want pedestrians to have a clear route where they can walk safely across the street, along comfortable sidewalks, and then make their way up to City Place. So our proposal shows these 2 raised crosswalks coming north across L Street and then west across Rosemary, where they are then in a protected crosswalk with landscape between them and the street all the way north until they get to cross Okeechobee. Recognizing that some folks may want to continue to walk on the east side of the street, we are proposing stamped concrete crosswalks as you move north on that private driveway easement where we cross Kiwi, and then as well on a northern crossing across Rosemary there, north of the site between the existing Hilton and City Place South Tower. In addition to those improvements, we have committed to a condition that we will design, construct, and install and maintain traffic calming measures, so speed bumps, speed humps, the like, subject to city approval. The city has an established process, an entire committee to review and approve traffic calming measures proposed on public right-of-way. So we've agreed to a condition of approval that prior to CO, we will move through that process in order to propose traffic calming measures along our valet route. So not only will those raised crosswalks that we've already proposed work as traffic calming measures, we are looking to do effectively whatever the city is willing to let us do in collaboration to maintain safe, slow speeds along that valet route when you're moving from Alabama to L Street over to the garage and back to our valet entry. And then the last thing I'll mention over on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, we have proposed, we heard early on that folks wanted an at-grade crossing. You can't tell here, but there's a goat path there where folks do seem to be crossing at grade on the far right-hand side of the screen, kind of between M Street and L Street. And so we've proposed, again, a voluntary condition that we will design and construct a sidewalk connection there so that effectively wheeled vehicles, and I think you might have heard some folks commute on scooters or bikes from the south, those wheeled vehicles can now use that at-grade crossing while the tunnel crossing can be reserved for pedestrians in order to prevent that conflict of somebody riding a bike or hitting somebody that's walking with their scooter. And so between these 3-4 different pedestrian safety improvements, we feel very confident that we've done all that we can to address that pedestrian priority and any conflict that there could be with cars circulating in this area. And so I'll move here to show that we believe we comply with all the site plan review standards. City staff within their staff report analyzes and agrees. I show you here the waiver summary table that we've run through, and again, that we've analyzed all of the applicable standards, as has staff, and we are in agreement that we do comply with these standards. And so lastly, I'll point out that starting back in March 2024, we did go out to the community with this. We had a series of meetings at that point in time before the design iteration really started. That's what helped take the form of that massing and how the height was made to shift and match like for like with our adjacent properties. More recently, midway through the process, we'll say February 25, as this project started to have some life breathed back into it, there was an open community meeting hosted at the Hilton just next door, open to everyone that wanted to attend. And then most recently, starting in June, we hosted a series of meetings, another open community meeting, and then more specific meetings with the Downtown Neighborhood Association, as well as some individual meetings with representatives in the Grandview Heights Neighborhood Association. And so the result of that coordination is a series of conditions of approval. Your planning board saw those conditions, and apologies, you may not be able to read any of those here, but they are in the backup and they will be included in the resolution at second reading. These are the updated conditions where we've worked to add a few extra things, the multiple raised crossings, the stamped crosswalks, specific language as it relates to that traffic delay. We've committed to work with the county in order to address that through signal timing. Additionally, this project, again, as mentioned, is an urban development within an urban development area, which is our downtown, adjacent to the edge condition, which is a single-family home outside of our downtown. And so there are necessarily concerns associated with what that looks like when you have urban and suburban development adjacent and abutting. We heard concerns from folks in the Grandview neighborhood, some of our most immediate neighbors, about noise, potentially from our amenity deck and specifically from the event hall space. And so what we've done is we've offered a condition of approval above and beyond what the city's noise ordinance already regulates, which we'll be subject to as any other business would be. We have offered to cease amplified outdoor noise at 10 p.m., as well as specific, what you see there in blue, language associated with directional speakers. We've heard about some issues from other hotel rooftops and the noise associated with them. We've analyzed what creates that noise impact, and we've figured out through the help of an acoustic engineer that it's directional speakers. And so we've commissioned an acoustic study, and we work closely to understand specifically what directionality and what that speaker impact looks like. And so that language, what you see here, suggests that no directional speakers shall be oriented in such a way that it creates that noise reverberating to the south, to our adjacent neighbors in those single-family communities. Similarly, we've offered additional light controls above and beyond those that already exist within the city's code. We are proposing utilizing fully shielded, full cutoff luminaires, which effectively means that above the 90-degree angle, you can't see the light and no light escapes. So it effectively means that light points down, okay? And then lastly, we get to neighborhood parking and valet. Here, it's important to note in terms of the parking, we've already mentioned all of the parking for this project will live in the convention center garage. But more than that, through the course of construction, all of our construction workers that are working on this project will be parked in that garage. So from the time that lease agreement comes online, we'll have 300 reserved spaces in that garage so that it's dedicated space, covered space, immediately adjacent to the site so that our construction workers are parking on site, walking right next door. We have heard, from the earliest meetings that there are concerns of parking and of, employees, construction worker parking and what have you throughout the community to the south. I know that this commission has worked to address some of those concerns from the community between the time we heard that and now, and we're working to do what we can by providing that dedicated structured parking on site. No one, employees, construction workers, or otherwise, will have any reason to park anywhere other than this immediately adjacent free parking that we're going to provide to them, construction workers through the life of construction, and our employees through the life of the project. And so, lastly, staff and planning board, who gave us unanimous recommendation of approval in June, agree that we've met all the necessary criteria. for these applications, and we're asking for your support as well tonight and a vote on the first reading of the ordinance and your consideration of these resolutions. We are happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for that presentation. Any questions of the applicant before we move to staff? Commissioner Ward and then Commissioner Sylvester.
Thank you for that detailed presentation. I have a couple questions. Start with my first one. When you were talking about the parking study, I noticed it said 2019. I assume that you guys looked to make sure that there weren't any change of conditions from 2019 until now. Obviously, that was before COVID, but that's your assumption, is that there have not been a change of conditions from 2019 to 2026?
That's correct. So the use of that garage is right now it's the convention center, and the convention center use and intensity hasn't expanded or changed since 2019. Those numbers in the 2019 study, they use a long-range analysis, so it's not just like they're taking a snapshot in 19. They're using the last 5 years of data up to that point. As you mentioned, it's pre-COVID, so if they would have taken data a couple of years in, it would have certainly skewed things. But no, there has been no change to the intensity of the use of that garage that would have adjusted that parking study. Okay. And I do apologize, but I failed to provide the clerk with a series of 11 letters of support that we have, and if I may, submit that for the record here.
All right, don't leave the mic yet because we got some other questions.
Understood.
Commissioner Sylvester.
Thank you. That was very detailed. I learned a lot more about the project. I thought I knew quite a bit about it. I do have a question about the lighting. I know you mentioned that you've taken great care to have them pointing downward, but where on that southern facade, can you show me that slide? Like, do you know where they're going to be? Are they on the main building, or are they on the
Yeah, so on this southern facade, along our amenity deck, we have very minimal lighting. So it's building-mounted lighting, again, with those fixtures pointing down. There's pool lighting going on up there at that amenity deck. Along L Street, the lighting that is provided there is actually the city's required streetlights. So the city's downtown urban regulations for streetscape design require streetlights. Those are the only lights that are provided along that south side.
Okay, if in the future there is an issue, you're going to address it, though. If these residents in the south on Grandview Heights actually experience light pollution coming in, you can address that.
Absolutely,
correct?
That's correct. And we would work, to the extent that it were streetlights, we would work with the city. If we needed to deviate from the city's standard streetlights, we would ask you to do that to avoid any light pollution on our neighbors. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Commissioner Fox.
Thank you, and I appreciate all the community outreach you've done. I know I was at least one of those meetings. But can you talk about anything else that you heard that was a concern that we should, I guess, address while you're here?
Yeah, I think in large part, these conditions of approval address it. Really, the pedestrian safety, the evolution of those pedestrian safety offerings, that was the biggest thing that we had heard through the course of our community outreach and that we continue to hear, in addition to the specific noise and light controls. So really working to address the pedestrian safety as it relates to folks walking through this area and that valet conflict, and then secondarily, the natural conflicts that you see when an urban project abuts a suburban project.
Commissioner Ward.
Thank you. And along the same lines, when you're talking about raised crosswalks, I love that, and it is a great, calming aspect. Who's maintaining that if there's any issues? Are you guys maintaining that?
That's correct, yeah. So our condition of approval requires that we pay to design, construct, and install and maintain that. We will have a maintenance agreement with the city to the extent that there is improvements in the right-of-way, as we would with any other project, making improvements in the right-of-way.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Commissioner Fox.
Thank you. This might be a question for staff, but just can you talk a bit about the active use liner? I guess, in my opinion, a hotel in general, it seems like the whole thing is an active use. So what kind of active use are they looking for?
Yeah, that's a good question. So again, the active use requirement necessitates that the facade is clear glass so that you see in and you see out of that space. And so what you see everywhere that's shaded in yellow there is that true active space. A lot of that is kitchen area, some of that is circulation area, where you will frequently have people moving around. And so you're seeing that activity in the street. Along our ground floor, all of that is lobby space. So that is fully activated there along Rosemary especially. And then as you move up above level 2, you're into the hotel rooms where naturally their windows are creating that activity out to the street.
Commissioner Ward.
Thank you. You talked about a potential shuttle. I think that that's very important, and I think it, given you're going to have two hotels, I don't know if you currently have a shuttle for the current hotel between the airport.
Yes.
You do? Okay. The current, I know, and I don't, correct me if I'm wrong. I know Ben has the circuit shuttle. Do you all currently have one, and you're going to have one at this hotel as well?
Exactly.
Okay.
Correct.
And then what's
that's incorporated within our TDM standards within our traffic study that's submitted for the record for the city.
Okay, so it's a requirement that's documented. And then what's the current stacking of the current hotel? You mentioned this one is have 6 cars usually, but not up to 9 cars. What's the one existing right now?
So the existing Hilton doesn't have stacking because it's free. Well, I'm sorry, at this site, it doesn't have stacking. The existing Hilton has stacking within their driveway.
What is that?
I apologize, I don't have that information on hand to know what their queuing is at their existing hotel, but they don't queue into this parking lot today. They have free flow access into this parking lot today.
Okay.
Any other questions for the applicant before we hear from staff? Commissioner Sylvester?
Just one more. On the east side, you mentioned a walk path or a path for scooters, and is it a sidewalk? Is it a street? What are you planning on building?
It would be a sidewalk, and so again, right now today there is. Folks, it looks like folks walk or either ride their bike. There's a carve-out path in the dirt, through the grass right there, where on the bottom right-hand side of the screen, you see that blue dash line. So the sidewalk on M Street terminates in dead ends right there where it approaches the tracks. We would be proposing a north-south connection to connect that dead end to the sidewalk that wraps Alabama and L Street. And so it would effectively, as you see that blue line, it would be able to bring folks north on the north side of the convention center townhomes without them having to cut through the tunnel. And then they could circulate west and then cross and travel up Rosemary.
Yes.
There'll still be a road there though, right? You're taking traffic out. So we don't really know how wide that sidewalk would be. Are you constructing it or is it the city?
It's on city's property, so that is subject to city approval. All of these conditions that are proposed are within the city's right-of-way, so these are all subject to city approval. We would go through a process. We would work with the city's parking and mobility director, I think specifically on that one. And then the rest of these traffic calming improvements, we would work through the city's traffic calming committee.
Thank you.
Any other questions for the applicant before we hear from staff? All right, staff, what say ye?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Chris Kimmerly, Principal Planner. As you've heard, this is a 3-part request. First reading is for the ordinance and then discussion of the 2 subsequent resolutions. We've already touched on this, but just to kind of reiterate, the property is at 900 South Rosemary. It's 1.2 acres. It is a surface parking lot today. It is within the DMP's Urban Central Business District future land use, and it is within the City Place CPD. The ordinance today is just to establish the Convention Center District along with the Hotel 2 sub-area, and then that sub-area and its regulations will be transferred to Resolution 156-26, and then the Level 3 site plan is in 157-26. To provide a little bit more background on the ordinance itself for the major amendment, when the City Place CPT was established, it established the overall development capacity that we have through the traffic equivalency throughout the whole DRI. Looking at the convention center specifically, in March 1999, City Commission did adopt the Level 3 site plan for the convention center, Phase 1 and 2. And this is important to point out because the area that you kind of see here bounded in this blue boundary was only regulated through those Level 3 site plan approvals. So when the convention center came in, it had its own site plan. When City Place South Tower came in, it had its own site plan. There wasn't a overarching regulation for this area. It was each individual property. And so because of that, the area you see in the green today does not have specific development regulations. It does not outline its building height, FAR, lot coverage, or anything that you see typical to a downtown development. So as part of both the ordinance and Resolution 156-26, we do establish that Convention Center District and the Hotel 2 sub-area. Again, this is to formulate a very comprehensive framework. We have regulations, intent, language, and specific language to that hotel district. And then these regulations are based entirely upon the downtown master plan regulations, and they're emerging of the city place development regulations, similar to what you see and what we did with the city place towers of 10 and 15 Rosemary there, and again, this building requirement table is meant to outline a very predictable framework for any future expansions, modifications, or as the applicant had mentioned, if this hotel application does not go through, we still establish a baseline development standard for any future development. Touching on the level 3 site plan, again, this is a 18-story building, 204 feet. 2 tiers. The higher podium is about 80 feet, the lower podium at 22. This contains 400 hotel rooms with about 7,400 square feet of restaurant and retail. It does have about 3,700 square feet of public open space. This is featured on the Rosemary frontage. And this is a plaza area with landscaping that meets DMP standards. And then their upper private open spaces amenitized through their pool deck and the restaurant space. Throughout the entire project, it maintains the DMP's standard of an 8-foot wide sidewalk with 4-foot plus landscape beds and street trees every 30 feet. So the entire perimeter of this project will be lushly landscaped and provide a nice pedestrian path. Parking on site, the project does have very limited parking within the building. It's located just on the first floor, and this is intended for valet operations. So it's about 11 spaces that are in the building itself. As the applicant had mentioned, the rest of the parking will be accommodated through their lease agreement with the county to house the parking within the Palm Beach County Convention Center garage. As part of this project and resolution, there are 3 requested waivers. 2 of those dealing with active use, 1 with the corner clearance. To touch on your point there, Commissioner Fox, so active uses per definition in the DMP today are spaces that are enclosed for human occupation, but they have to provide a direct view to the street. And so where we have non-active uses like parking, mechanical, back of house, we typically have those screened. But active areas need to have that interaction and play with the street, and so we want that clear glazing. And so it's important to note that what you see here in the yellow on that second floor, those are active use areas, so that is their catering kitchen and other kitchen services. But the areas you see in the red, this one section is a mechanical room, and the other section here is mechanical kitchen rooms, stairs, and then restrooms. So because those spaces do not provide direct views out to the street, they cannot count as active use. So it's just a technicality within the code. And that is what they're seeking relief on. As the applicant illustrated, they did an excellent job of creating a very seamless facade design. So in those areas where it is not active, they are using spandrel glass to keep that fenestration pattern. Again, it's indistinguishable between what is active and non-active on that facade. The second waiver is for the active use on the ground floor. And the intent of this active use requirement within the Hotel 2 sub-area regulations is really to provide residents or patrons coming from the south, from the Grandview Heights area northward. We wanted to have an activated corner. So when you take that little passageway through, you come and arrive at an active corner that leads you up. This is still maintained in their current iteration in the project here. As you can see, there is an active office space and uses related to the hotel itself. However, the remaining portion, which would probably be about this little section here, is actually their FPL vault, a couple mechanical spaces. And so the full facade and that requirement that we have 20% isn't met. They meet about 9 to 10%. But we're, again, okay with this waiver as we feel like the design meets the intent. And in this area, again, it is a very seamless transition between what is active and non-active. the use of spandrel glass in the continuous facade still creates that active frontage and the perception. And again, as the applicant illustrated it, draws the pedestrian crowds north along Rosemary and away from the non-active areas east toward the FEC. And the last waiver that is part of the resolution is for the corner clearance. And again, this is intended to provide a minimum distance separation from an intersection. It's maintained, sufficient visibility and stacking and queuing for vehicles. As part of this application, they are seeking about a 6-foot reduction. This 6-foot reduction wouldn't necessarily accommodate an extra vehicle within that space. And our traffic consultant looked at this and analyzed the interaction of what's happening with the valet and the circulation and concluded that the request is a good waiver to support. And again, this is that area here. So typically you'd need 50 feet. They're about 43 feet. I just want to highlight some public comments we received. So prior to planning board, we did receive a formal letter from the Grandview Heights neighborhood. They did express concerns and opposition initially to this project, and they had a list of conditions and improvements they would like to be seen as part of this application. I will say many of their points have been integrated now into conditions of approval within the ordinance or the resolution itself and the level 3 site plan. Same with this email we received from Gino Baruni of the City Place South Towers. Again, he had concerns and some suggestions regarding the design of the podium and general planning inquiries of, requests asking for additional information. I will say prior to City Commission here and after the Planning Board meeting, we did meet with Chris Worcester and Bruce Barber. They're residents of the Grandview Heights neighborhood. And they had advocated for additional language to some of the conditions that were presented at Planning Board. And we have those presented here today to kind of shore up the condition language and help alleviate some of the concerns of the Grandview Heights neighborhood. So I'll touch on the conditions of approval. We have about 15 of them. I will say the first 7 that you see listed here are general conditions that would be applicable to any site plan within the downtown. So the first one is a tree alteration permit. The second one is touching on the maintenance agreement. So any improvements made within the right-of-way around the project would require a maintenance agreement between the city and the developer. We have a parking management and construction plan when they go into that process. Mechanical equipment we want screened. The replat of the property should be required. Any easements should be platted via legal instrument. And another point here is our city planning and mobility staff, we're looking to implement additional TDMs associated with this project. And now going specifically into some conditions that are project specific. The first one there is the 2 rectangular rapid flashing beacons and raised crosswalks that the applicant has agreed to do. And then with the addition of 2 additional stamped concrete crosswalks at Kiwi and across Rosemary. The other condition there is speed humps and traffic calming along L Street. And the improvements to the eastern corridor to add a multi-purpose path. More likely, it'll be about a 12-foot wide path for bike ped use, as the city has about 30 feet of right-of-way there. So we can, provide at least 12 feet for the multi-purpose path and maybe some landscaping to buffer that. And then the other improvements that were asked were for the continuance of analyzing the impact of the traffic signal at Rosemary. So the applicant has said that they would work with the county to assess that traffic signal, and if there's any improvements that can be made to the timing and the sequences, they would go through that route. And the last one, of course, or the 12 here, is to minimize the amplified noise to the southern residential properties. Here are just a diagram of what we would have as raised crosswalks. Those are in red. And then the stamped asphalt or stamped concrete crosswalks would be illustrated there in the yellow. And then the last three conditions is to minimize the light pollution, again, with the shielded fixtures. Number 14 there is the parking agreement within the city's, or within the Palm Beach County Convention Center. And number 15 is just to reiterate that the valet operations that's been vetted so heavily by city planning staff and our traffic consultant, there's a diagram and circulation plan. We want to maintain that configuration, and so the expectation is valet operations will follow that plan as illustrated. Overall, ordinance 5179-26 and resolution 156-26 to comply with our amendment and rezoning standards, as well as the standards within the City Place District. PPRC, our Plan, Plats, and Review Committee, looked at this in July of 2024 and was satisfactory with all comments. Planning Board recommended approval in June with a 4-0 vote in favor, and public notices and mailers have been sent out to all property owners within 500 feet, and signage was posted on site. As for the resolution 157-26 to level 3, this complies with City Place standards to section 94-115A and the zoning and land development regulations section 94-35C, the qualitative development standards. Again, this was heard by PPRC in 2024 and actually brought back within the latest iterations, and then Planning Board voted in favor, and public notice was provided within 500 feet to all property owners, and signage was posted as well. It is staff's recommendation to recommend approval of this ordinance 5179-26 based on the fact that it does meet the required amendment standards found in section 9432 of the West Palm Beach zoning and land development regulations. If there are any questions.
Very good. Any questions for staff? Commissioner Ward.
What part of the conditions discusses that they'll be, because they talk about the construction workers, but I understood from the applicant's presentation that they would be providing free parking for their staff as well. Is there anything in the language that actually talks about that?
Yes, so condition number 14, and this is in section 5 of the resolution. The last line there is the lease shall allow for construction worker parking during the construction phase of the project.
Yeah, but I'm talking about when they finish the hotel workers.
So within the zoning requirements, the minimum required parking for this project is 135 spaces to serve the hotel. They have an obligation as part of this condition as well, that minimum 135 spaces is within the lease agreement between the county and the project.
Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Fox.
Thank you. So I'm glad to see that the conditions included the pedestrian safety and the paths that they mentioned and the speed bumps. Is that the responsibility of the applicant to pay for those and create them, or is that something that how does that work?
Yeah, so the intent is that the applicant and developer would be the one that is responsible for building and constructing these. But then again, this is within city right of way, so it would be in coordination with the city on the exact design and nature of how many speed bumps, where they're located, and those details. But the implementation and construction is through the applicant and developer of this project.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, we do have several cards here. I'm going to read out some names if you start making your way toward the podium. Bruce Barber, Dave Anderson, Nicholas Bixler, and Robin Conages. Bruce Barber.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Bruce Barber of Grandview Heights, 1208 Florida Avenue. I'd like to thank staff and others who have worked with us on these conditions. And, you know, Grandview Heights is obviously right directly beside or across from the pool deck. And we're a little worried, but we understand this is a good project. It's good for everyone. So we're willing to just go with the flow. But there's a couple items that, two conditions that we would like to amend if possible, and that's And we appreciate staff working with us. But condition number 8 and condition number 12. Condition number 8 is pertaining to the valet traffic flow. We actually did a little pedestrian traffic study in the tunnel coming from Grandview into or towards City Place, and there's actually about 800 to 1,000 people that use that per day on average. So, almost everybody uses the east side of Rosemary. They don't cross over down to City Place and then come back. They all use the east side and they continue to City Place, and then they go downtown, which is generally east from there. So it's real difficult to try and reroute the traffic across towards the existing Hilton and down. So my request is that we also have an elevated, I guess it's crosswalk at Kiwi. I know we talked about it's a private street and everything, but I feel like it's not really good enough reason to alleviate a pedestrian safety issue. I mean, it's a private street. We're using it for valet parking. We're using it for everything right now. So why not install the same elevated crosswalk that's crossing L Street and crossing Rosemary at Kiwi? So that's one concern. My kids, a lot of kids in our neighborhood use this crosswalk crossing Kiwi towards City Place. It's a real hazard right now with all the valet traffic coming back and forth from the existing Hilton. I understand it's going to be a one-way in for the new hotel, and the Hilton will no longer use that term, but it's still going to be really busy. So it's a big hazard. We've almost been hit a number of times by the valets. And then condition number 12, could we amend that to state that the loudspeakers are oriented to the east? So if they're oriented away from Grandview Heights, it's still going to bounce off the building and echo back into our neighborhood. So I feel like the solution is just all loudspeakers must be oriented to the east, and then it's not affecting anyone. And that's going out to the cemetery, basically, and no one's going to hear it, or at least less sound. That's all I have to say.
All right. Thank you very much. Dave Anderson?
Yeah, good evening, Mayor. Commissioners, thanks for having me. My name is Dave Anderson, General Manager of the Palm Beach County Convention Center. As I stated earlier today, I started as General Manager in April of 2003, so I was here to open the Convention Center. Thank you, City, for that approval. I was here for the opening of the parking garage and then the building and opening of the first hotel. I've been driving in from Wellington for the last 23 years, taking either Parker or Dixie or Oakey or any way I can find to move around in that area. So I think I have a pretty good understanding of traffic in the area. Whereas earlier I talked about kind of the evolution of the campus and the success we've had and how businesses went from short to long. I just wanted to talk briefly about the relationship. So when we started and we opened the building, of course, we didn't have a parking garage, we didn't have a hotel, but then we started working with our owners, the county, on the parking garage, and hats off to the county back in 2013 in supporting us to actually build the garage much bigger than it should have been at that time, knowing that we had the expansion of the building coming up. So from a cost standpoint and everything else, it was 10 years ahead of its time. But if you look where we're at now, we're not having to do anything because we actually can use that garage today. At the same time, we were finishing the garage. Related came on board, and I started working, and my staff with Related on the building of the hotel. And I can tell you the relationship with the developer, Related, the construction company, was second to none all the way through. We kept doing events while they were building the hotel, and we were finishing the parking garage at the same time. So the need for alignment and collaboration 24/7, 365 was critical. So I knew that anytime I needed to pick up the phone, I could pick up the phone and call somebody with the developer, with Related, or with the construction company, and there was always a response right away. And in our business, the event business, as all of you know, success is critical and the customer experience is critical. And the last thing I want to just talk about is the quality of the product. I'm sure all of you have been in the Hilton hotel that they built. I deal with a lot of hotels around the country, and from a convention center hotel, it's one of the nicest in the country. And now we're going to add a second one that is fitting to this community and our whole entire campus. So I'm speaking in favor of what was talked about tonight. And then maybe the last thing is on the garage. We are putting construction staff and valet in there, and the fact that we actually overbuilt the garage is allowing us to do that, but continue to do business as we are today for all of our events. And then the fact that we're going longer-term events, it is less cars that we will be parking in the garage because most of these people are coming for Uber or shuttle buses onto the campus. So thanks for having me, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Robin Canoxis and Nicholas, you can make your way down. Yeah.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Robin Cornagius. I'm from the Grandview Heights neighborhood. Sorry, this is out of my wheelhouse, so I need to read what I wrote.
Take your time.
So forgive me.
3 minutes.
Good evening, Mayor and staff. I think we all recognize that our historic neighborhoods are an important part of the West Palm Beach history, identity, and character. In preparing for tonight, I researched how Charleston, Savannah, Alexandria, Boston have all balanced growth with their historic neighborhoods. Although each city is different, they share one common principle. They plan proactively and work with the historic neighborhoods rather than reacting after problems arise. My comments tonight are less about the particular project, but more about understanding the city's process in this. Grandview Heights is more than a historic district. It is an active residential neighborhood where families, children, and longtime residents live every day. As development continues throughout West Palm Beach, many residents hope our historic neighborhoods will be viewed not only simply as areas of adjacent to new development, but as valued partners whose concerns are considered throughout the process. With that in mind, I'd like to better understand a few aspects of the city's review process. First, what infrastructure reviews were completed to determine this project can be accommodated while maintaining adequate capacity for water, sewer, drainage, and other public utilities? If infrastructure needs improvement, will those improvements be completed before the projects become operational? Second, Grandview Heights has already experienced construction workers from nearby projects parking throughout a residential area, even though they also have designated parking. How will the Curio project be different, and how will it be enforced? Who will monitor the compliance, and what action will be taken when contractors park in neighborhood streets instead of designated parking areas? Also, once a hotel is operating, how will the city ensure that the hotel, restaurant, convention, and event guests do not overflow into neighborhood streets for parking, especially since it was just mentioned there was only 135 spaces for hotel staff? Finally, if the project receives final approval, what ongoing process will the city have to work with the Grandview Heights and other historic neighborhoods as these concerns arise? So my hope is that West Palm Beach continues to be known not only for the thoughtful growth and thoughtful preservation, but also for recognizing that our historic neighborhoods are partners in shaping our city future. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you, is Jose Luis here? Yeah, can you sit and tell her how to contact staff to get the answers to some of those questions by email? Thank you. Mr. Bixler.
Hello again, Mayor, Commissioners. Nicholas Bixler, 1970 South Dixie Highway. I'm here today in my personal capacity as a resident of the city. As mentioned earlier, I take my micro-mobility device to work many days through Florida, through that cut through at Rosemary. There are a lot of pedestrians who use it. It is a little bit of a choke or conflict point. There's actually a sign there that says bicycles use the path down east on Alabama that was mentioned earlier, but there is no paved path there. So as a resident, I do welcome the benefit, the public benefit that the developer is providing with that paved pathway for bicyclists and other pedestrians to get to and from that neighborhood into City Place or the convention center area. In general, I'm supportive of this project. I think this represents smart growth and reasonable development. You are taking a surface parking lot and you're building something viable for the community. You're not losing the parking spots because you're taking them and using an underutilized parking garage that's not at capacity even when there are conferences and events at that convention center. So again, you're taking something that doesn't need to be there and you're replacing it with an asset for the city. As a resident, I use the Hilton Hotel. I've gone to the pool. I've gone to the restaurants, events there, conferences there. I imagine that I will be using the space that this hotel is going to provide, whether it's the restaurants, whether it's conferences, things of that nature. So I'm looking forward to that addition to our community. I don't know what else to touch on. I'm sure the economic impact can't be overstated. The jobs it will bring, the employees for the hotel, the visitors, the tourist dollars that it will bring. So again, overall, I'm very supportive of this project, and thank you for listening.
Thank you very much. That is the last card, so I'll open it up again for any comments from the dais. All right, hearing none, I will enter. Yes, Commissioner Ward.
I think it's reasonable to ask for the other raised crosswalk. I think they're very important. They calm traffic, and I was curious what the applicant thought about that request.
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner. That's something that we have talked to Bruce and the Grandview residents about. Again, I'll remind you, we only control the south half of that. That is a private driveway easement. The north half of that is owned by City Place South Tower to the north of us. They are not inclined to provide that. I will also mention we are asking for a waiver at that driveway, and creating a raised crosswalk there creates a conflict point in the intersection. It requires vehicles to slow down as they're trying to make that turn onto Kiwi Street. And so in coordination with the city's traffic consultant, there's a real safety concern about having cars slow down in the middle of that intersection as they're trying to cross to Kiwi. So between those two factors, we were not able to offer a raised crosswalk at that location. We were offering the stamped concrete, which creates a materiality and a visual discrepancy. So it does still provide a benefit. But I'll say, and I think this is something we're all aware of, pedestrian safety is just as much about pedestrian behavior as it is infrastructure. We've all seen in City Place, for instance, along Rosemary, when you have uncontrolled crossings, you get uncontrolled crossing, and you have people crossing the street every which way, not looking at cars all over the place, and it increases the potential for pedestrian vehicle conflicts. In creating the dedicated route on the south side of the project, we route people through a raised crosswalk north from that cut through across L Street and then across Rosemary to where they're on a protected sidewalk with 4+ feet of landscaping between them and the drive lane. So we're creating that route to give the safest pedestrian route. And yes, I'll say it may require some adjustment for the folks that walk through there if they want to walk on the safest route. If they want to keep walking on the east side, we're doing what we can with that stamped concrete there. And if I could just speak to Bruce's second point on the directionality of the speakers, we've spoken about that in detail with them as well. The reality is, in saying that it needs to be pointed to the east, it actually creates a situation where we would be required to face directional speakers in an area that could create more reverberation. So Bruce is thinking, facing it away from the building, which I understand. The language that we've proposed in the condition specifies that it has to be faced internal to the site. The main focus here is in the event ballroom, and if you might imagine a speaker that's on the west or on the east side of the event ballroom facing west into that space, it actually creates less noise than something that's on the east side facing out. And so we've looked at that in great detail, and that's why we've arrived at the condition language we have with staff. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? If not, I will entertain a motion.
Mayor, I move to approve ordinance number 5179-26 regarding the City Place commercial plan development to adopt development regulations for the Convention Center District and Hotel 2 Suburbia, and to transfer the development regulations and all future major amendments to Resolution 156-26. This motion is based upon the factual testimony presented, the application submitted, the staff report, the recommendation of the Planning Board, and the findings that the major plan development amendment to the City Place CBD meets all 8 of the required amendment standards found in Section 94-32 of the City of West Palm Beach zoning and land development regulations.
It's been moved. Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Hearing none. Madam Clerk, can you read the ordinance, please?
Ordinance number 5179-26, an ordinance of the City Commission of the City of West Palm Beach, Florida, amending ordinance number 2267-89 as amended by ordinance number 3126-98, relating to the City Place commercial plan development to adopt development regulations for the Convention Center District, generally located between Okeechobee Boulevard, Howard Park, M Street, N Street, and Alabama Avenue, and to transfer those development regulations to resolution number 156-26, providing a conflicts clause, providing an effective date, and for other purposes.
All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Hearing no opposition, motion carries unanimously. Thank you. All right, we will now turn to comments from the public. Do we have cards?
No, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. We'll now go for comments from the dais. We'll begin with you, President Peduzzi.
No comments this evening, Mayor.
Commissioner Fox. You all right? Okay, just make sure you're not sitting. Commissioner Fox?
No comments, Mayor.
No, what? Okay, Commissioner Sylvester?
Few comments.
That's fine. I didn't expect unanimity. That's all right.
Thanks, everyone, for coming. First, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who made the Back to School Wellness and Resource Fair at Emmanuel Deliverance such a success. It was a wonderful seeing families come together, students getting ready for the new school year, and so many organizations stepping up to serve our community. That's what West Palm is all about. I'd also like to thank Commissioner Ward for the invitation to recognize our Education Advisory Committee. To each committee member, thank you for investing your time, talents, and passion into supporting our students and strengthening education in our city. We truly appreciate all that you do. Looking ahead, I'm excited to attend the Community Health Center's open house tomorrow. It's always great to celebrate organizations that are expanding access to quality health care and making a real difference in the lives of our residents. And of course, I can't wait for National Night Out with the West Palm Police Department. It's one of my favorite community events because it gives residents an opportunity to meet our officers, build relationships, and strengthen the partnerships that help keep our neighborhoods safe. That's it.
Thank you. Commissioner Warren.
No comment.
Commissioner Ward.
I just have one comment, and thank you, Commissioner Sylvester. I wanted to give a shout out and kudos to the Old Northwood Association. They hosted a fantastic fundraiser this past Saturday night for our local fire station, and it was a huge turnout, and tons of our police chief and representatives from our police department were also there as well. It was a great occasion, and they started it all themselves, and so I just wanted to say to any of the Old Northwood neighbors and residents who are listening, thank you so much. It was a fantastic event, and we appreciate you.
Very briefly, I want to encourage everyone to participate in our fiscal year 2027 proposed budget community survey. Your feedback is an important part of the city's budget development process, and we want to hear your priorities and ideas as we plan for the coming year. The survey is open now and will remain available until Thursday, September 3rd at 5 p.m. I encourage all residents to take a few minutes to share their input. We also invite the community to join us for our community budget meeting on Monday, August 24th. A virtual meeting will be held at 1 p.m. via Zoom, and an in-person meeting will take place at 6 p.m. here at City Hall. Whether you complete the survey, attend one of the meetings, or do both, your participation helps shape the city's priorities and ensures your voice is part of the budget process. To take the survey and learn more about the budget meetings, visit WPB.org/budget. That's WPB.org/budget. And that concludes my remarks for tonight. Good night, everyone. God bless each and every one of you in the great city of West Palm Beach. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.